Right now, I want to welcome to the program from Rick's Firearm Academy of Detroit, Rick Ector is with us. Rick, how are you, sir?
Man, I am cold and wet with the weather here in Detroit, man, but I'm also excited, doubly so. I'm on the show again, Cam and Company, and next week, man, I'm going to make my first ever voyage to Nashville, Tennessee, so I'm stoked.
I'm really excited about Nashville, and listen, I appreciate you saying you're really excited to be back on the program, but you're famous now, man. You're on NPR.
You know what I tell my friends? I tell my friends when they tell me such things, I tell them, hey, so-called fame and $2 might get you a decent cup of coffee.
But this was an interesting piece. Say what you will about NPR and the bias I think that many of the reporters at NPR have. As a old radio guy and a radio reporter, I love long-form radio journalism, and it's one of the few places, unfortunately, that you get long-form radio journalism these days. And so they did have this piece, more African Americans support carrying legal guns for self-defense. They went to Detroit. They talked with Police Chief James Craig, who has talked about his support of the right to keep and bear arms, including the right to carry a firearm. And NPR spent some time with you. So I got to ask, Rick, what do you think of the story and how it turned out?
I looked at the story, and, I like the fact that you got both sides to the story, which was cool, and I must be very biased because I like the things that DPD Chief James Craig had to say, and, of course, I like what I had to say. And, my biasness kicks in. I didn't like some of the responses from the other two guys. One guy, I regularly butt heads with him up in the media down here in Detroit. But, some of the things that he said and that the other guy said didn't really ring true. There's this concern that if African Americans carry guns, they're going to face greater scrutiny. That just flies in the face of the numerous times I've appeared on this very program with you guys. And we've talked about law-abiding citizens who are legally carrying guns, who've gone through the training. They know what the laws are. They know exactly when they can defend themselves, and they know how to defend themselves. So, really that rang very hollow to me. And, the story that you guys led into this story, the whole New Jersey thing, I touched on that, too, in the piece when I say that the gun laws, primarily across the country where they're most stringent and strict, and I would even say draconian, tend to be in urban areas where most black people tend to live. Your places like Camden, New Jersey, Los Angeles, California, Chicago, Illinois. Do I need to continue? And, here in Detroit, man, we have some decent gun laws, compared to some places. They're excellent, but we need to keep the fight up and keep going back to, shall not be infringed. But we're making progress. Hopefully we'll get there. I'm encouraged by a lot of states who are going to constitutional carry. But, the story overall, I liked it, but I didn't particularly care for, some of the comments that my opponents had to say.
Well, yeah, but that's it's one thing to say I disagree with my opponents, but at least you were in the story. At least Chief James Craig was in the story, and look, I mean, there's an undeniable fact here that NPR reports on. They say, according to a survey by the Pew Research Center, 54% of Black Americans now see gun ownership as a good thing, something more likely to protect than harm. That's up from 29%, they say, just 2 years ago. So let me ask you, Rick, first of all, do you think that Pew Research Center, and we can, look, no poll is an exact snapshot, so I'm not going to say, do you really think it's gone up from 29 to 54%? But have we seen a sea change over the last couple of years in terms of viewing gun ownership as a good thing or a bad thing?
When you look at, pockets of this country, especially like Metro Detroit, man, we've had violent crime persist here for years. And really, there wasn't any recourse. You call 911 and hope they get here. But back in 2001, we changed the law. We went from discretionary to mandatory issuing of licenses if the person meets the statutory requirements. And, the magical thing happens when you empower people to protect themselves and do for themselves. They would rather, become their own first responder and be able to deal and address a situation, immediately rather than, try to hide under a bed and hope that they don't, turn up on the nightly newscast as another statistic. So I think when you empower people, you help them exercise a more active role in their personal protection, and it resonates, and it's something that's readily adopted by people here in the community, not only in Detroit, but also nationally. Who wouldn't want to have an opportunity to protect themselves and as opposed to outsource it to some other agency? I would imagine very few, and you know what? We're going to continue increasing those numbers. I mean, right now, we're at the tipping point where we're at a point where we're really making some inroads towards adopting pro-gun views in the black community, and it's a positive trend, and hopefully it'll continue forth. It will increase personal safety and also the general cause of liberty.
I hope so, Rick. I've always said our right to keep and bear arms, it is not a right of some Americans. It is not a right of Republicans or of conservative Americans. It is certainly not a right of white Americans or of males only. Our freedoms, those that were protected by our forefathers, those who, they thought to preserve these freedoms. They wanted to make sure that the government did not encroach on these liberties. These are precious things that have been handed down to us, and we and our fathers and our forefathers have expanded those freedoms again, so that more and more Americans can exercise those rights. So I hope that we do see this continue. I really truly do, and I thank you so much for everything that you're doing, Rick.
Hey man, I appreciate it. So very much. Glad to be on again. Tell all the guys I said hello. The other Cam. Eric and Mr. Pop, tell those guys, hey, and I look forward to seeing them and you live and in person next week, man.
Rick, we will see you there, sir. I appreciate you joining us today.
Man, my pleasure. Talk
Rick
to you next
Ector.
week.
All right, Rick Ector from Rick's Firearm Academy of Detroit.